shares news from all over the world, all across social media. My name's Jamie Lowe. I'm based in the UK. I live in Bristol. So I'm going to be giving an update on the recent developments on the UK government's response to the coronavirus pandemic. Boris Johnson spoke to the public about 15 minutes or so ago to speak about some new restrictions that we're seeing. We've seen quite a dramatic increase in coronavirus infections right across the UK, not just in England, where we're seeing some of these restrictions, which I'll talk about in just a few moments. But even today, we've seen a record number of cases, 4,926 cases in the last 24 hours. Hello to everyone who is watching. Good to have you here. And we're going to talk through some of these new lockdown restrictions that we're going to be seeing. Now, Prime Minister Boris Johnson did say that these would likely be with us for the next 6 months. So we better get to know them, get to understand them, and get used to them, because we are not likely to see the end of them by Christmas, which is what we all first hoped right at the start of this pandemic in the spring. So it's a return to the work from home advice that is mainly for people who work in offices. It's not like the work from home order right at the start of March. If you have a job in construction or in a production line in a factory, you're still expected to go to work. But if you work in an office, if your job, like many people's jobs, are a 9-to-5 office job, sitting at a computer all day, if you can work from home, then do that. That is the request from the government, to get a bit more into actual demands and orders a little further down in the list. Stay safe, Jamie, says Mark Brogan. You too, my friend, you too. Pubs, bars and restaurant, the whole hospitality industry is now subject to a 10 p.m. curfew. Now, that's not 10 p.m. last orders where you're able to finish a drink. That's a 10 p.m., hard kick out time. You'll have to leave by 10 p.m. because that is when the hospitality industry essentially will be closing in England. More rules in terms of face masks. We're going to be expected to wear them in taxis. Staff in retail sectors will now be expected to wear face masks, and you'll be expected to wear your face mask upon entering a restaurant right until the moment that you are at your seat, and it's only table service from now. There is a reduction in how many people can go to weddings. That's been slashed in half, from 30 to a max of 15 now. But funerals, you'll still be able to have 30 guests at a funeral, and that rule of 6 is now going to apply to indoor adult team sports also. Being in the era that we are, that a lot of everything is televised constantly, we saw this new list of rules much earlier than we would have in decades previous. So we were well aware of what the new package of lockdown restrictions are. So we were able to, sort of digest them and sort of wait for Boris's delivery to see, what the tone was coming from the head of the English government. Are they limiting the number of guests in bars, says Drew? No, not currently. Well, yes. So every sort of indoor hospitality area has a COVID secure or COVID safe number of guests that they're allowed to have in at any one time, but no sort of limit from government. It's sort of individual in terms of each bar, pub or restaurant, but that's nothing new. We've had that since the start. They have moved most restaurants outside into the streets or parking lots here in Los Angeles. Haven't seen this with bars, but it wouldn't be surprised that happens soon. Lots of areas of big cities in the UK now are following that similar structure. There is an area in Bristol called King Street, which is completely pedestrianised, and all the fairly small, pokey, independent restaurants and bars have spilled out onto the streets. You still get served inside, but you sit, or there's more seating outside, because obviously in the smaller ones, and there's some very small places to go and have a drink or have some food on King Street. So it would be really difficult for those businesses to operate in a very COVID secure way. But that was something that was already happening around Bristol, where I live. Lots of more pedestrianisation to help, the hospitality sector really get back up on its feet. Now, obviously, this increase of coronavirus cases has halted the government's reopening strategy. The next thing on the list was business conferences and sports. The sports was supposed to be reopened for audiences and spectators, but that was supposed to happen by the 1st of October, the 1st of next month. But sadly, that's been halted for now. And Scotland is going a whole step further. Nicola Sturgeon asking Scottish people living in Scotland, not to mix indoors, but they still can get together outdoors. So it's not too bad. It's not a full lockdown yet, but that is the warning. That is the warning that this is a preventative measure to stop another national lockdown. And as we head into the winter months and the COVID cases are rising, that is everything that we want to avoid. I really do not know what the difference this will make, as I'm worried people will be leaving pubs at the same time and piling onto trains, stations, and causing more health concerns. I do not know if this was carefully thought, says Marianne. That has been a point raised by many throughout the day. Is this going to mean that taxi ranks are full of people, drunk people, all being kicked out of the pub at the same time? Does this mean, like you say, that public transport now will be heaving with drunk people on the way back home after an earlier night on the lash? I went out for a rare COVID night out. It was a COVID day out that sort of spilled over into the evening, let's say, on Saturday, and I used public transport for the first time since the pandemic began. And the mask wearing on my way in at, the sort of early afternoon into Bristol city centre from where I live just outside was, everyone was being quite good. Everyone had their masks on. People were socially distanced. But on the way back, there was definitely sort of a change in mood. Maybe, a bit of beer, a bit of wine, a few spirits too, made people be a bit more lax in their COVID measures, let's say. A few less masks I did see on my way back. But we are going to start to see these rules enforced a little more heavily as well. Boris Johnson mentioning fines of up to £10,000 for the worst rule breakers. That £100 fine for not wearing a mask in the first instance is now doubled to £200. And if we don't take action, we will have to deal with more difficult measures. That's what he said. Another quote from him, which I think really stood out, was, "These risks are not our own." This in response to people that are tired of the lockdown restrictions and think we should all be able to take our own risks and get back to reality, or get back to normality as quickly as we each personally feel comfortable. But he said in response to that, these risks are not our own. Your mild cough could be someone's death nail. Now, all of these new restrictions are coming off the back of quite a catastrophe, a very public, well-publicised catastrophe in the government's testing scheme. Still, people being forced to make hundreds of mile round trips, home test kits unavailable for many, and lots of people still ineligible to get a test. You're only allowed to get a test if you've got symptoms, or you live with someone who is displaying symptoms, or you've been asked to by a healthcare professional, such as the Test, Track and Trace service. But I'm going to play a little video of what Boris had to say about his new package of coronavirus Just cut Boris off there. Oh no, back. Okay, I think we're just gonna have to deal with Boris just over my which is that, left or right, my shoulder, whichever one that is. Working with some new features here on Haps, lots of new exciting features, meaning that you can do what we've just done there, show you some actual video. Just a comment there came in from Brett Walker, who always sounds like his batteries are about to run out. I think mine would be too if I was leading a government during a pandemic. It must be really tough. I'm not sure this is the tenureship that Boris was hoping for when he finally got into government, but alas, that is the task that he has been asked to deal with. And I'd like to know your thoughts with how Boris and his government is dealing with the current pandemic. You know, we've got sort of rivaling parts of the cabinet. We've got, the Chancellor's office trying to get the economy back on its feet, the Health Secretary trying to ensure that there is a test, track and trace service and stop the coronavirus spreading any further, and Boris Johnson trying to lead it all. But let's give you a quick update on what the picture's looking like today in the UK. I mentioned a little earlier on in this broadcast, another 4,926 people have tested positive for coronavirus in the US, and that is the highest daily figure that we've seen since May the 7th. A further 37 people have also died within 28 days of testing positive for COVID-19, and that again is another high number. That's the highest number reported in one day since the 14th of July. Most of Tuesday's, that's today's cases, were reported in England. The total reported cases in England coming in at 4,187. 383 in Scotland, 281 in Wales, and 75 in Northern Ireland. And all of the newly reported deaths, apart from one, which came in Scotland, came from England. So a record number of coronavirus cases, and in response, a new list of rules from the government, and a warning that there are more rules to follow, tougher rules to follow, which we could see, in the form of a new national lockdown, a second one that was so devastating to many people's lives. Many people's lives haven't really got back to where they were before the lockdown. Lots of people now feeling the effects of the economic shutdown. Many more redundancies announced from large UK businesses today. Premier Inn, for example, I think the number was around 6,000 staff that they are planning to lose. So as the furlough scheme comes to an end, and remember that ends at the end of this month, which we're hurtling towards the end of, then that is when we're going to see yet again a lot more redundancies as that sort of takes effect, really. But let's just sort of run down what these new rules are, so we've really got them in our head. I'm sure many of us would have heard them over and over again today, but for our viewers from across the world, let's just run through them once more. So these new measures announced today by Boris Johnson, which he said would likely be in place for the next 6 months, include asking office workers to work from home again where possible, although those in key public services and all in professions where this is not possible should continue in their workplace, such as construction and retail. From Thursday, tomorrow, all pubs, bars and restaurants must offer table service only and close at 10 p.m. But delivery services, so takeaways, they can still remain open. The requirement to wear a face covering has been extended to staff in retail, people in taxis and private hire cars, everybody using hospitality services, apart from when you're sitting at your table, which you're only allowed to do now. Only table service is allowed, and you are allowed to take your mask off to enjoy your food or drink. And those fines for not wearing a face covering has now doubled to £200 for the first offence. And stricter measures in terms of businesses who are flouting the rules. I, on Saturday, avoided a few establishments which were blatantly flouting COVID secure guidelines, and businesses flouting those COVID secure guidelines will now face a £10,000 or risk of closure. Now, that applies as a legal obligation for retail, leisure and tourist firms. And again, those not complying are running the risk of a hefty £10,000 fine or closure. That's a similar size fine to those people who were organising illegal raves. So that's, that was the government's major fire to put out a few weeks ago, and they're classing it as something of that same seriousness. And from Monday, a maximum of only 15 people will be allowed to attend weddings. 30 though can still attend a funeral. And that rule of 6, which we are currently working with here in England, has been extended to indoor sports such as five-a-side football games. Lucky for five-a-side teams, only one sub, and the phased reopening of stadiums for sporting events and conferences, like I mentioned earlier, on the 1st of October, has now been scrapped. Ian G has just followed me on Haps. Thank you so much, Ian, for the follow. I'm broadcasting to you live tonight, guys, on Haps, a network of now, a place where people all over the world can share the news where they are. That's what I'm doing tonight with you. I'm showing you what Boris Johnson announced today to Parliament, and then explained a little later on to us, regular humans here in England. That announcement came with what I think is quite a standout quote from Boris, a real tug on the heartstrings to people who are generally getting quite tired of these coronavirus restrictions. These risks are not our own. Your mild cough could be someone's death nail. And that's the line that the government's been toting. You might not be so badly affected by coronavirus, but your grandparent might, or someone who is in a vulnerable category who you might come into contact with in passing, it could be a very serious illness for them instead. And we started to see a slip in, I think, the public spirit that coronavirus brought. I think if we remember back to when this was first a new thing in all of our lives in March, in the spring, there was a lot of community spirit, and I think that's what Boris is hoping to inspire back into the people of England, a bit more of that community spirit. We're all in this together. He's calling on collective common sense to beat this virus. And he's right there, doesn't it? Isn't he? It does, rely on us following the guidelines, and I guess it's also understandable that people are getting a little bit tired of them, especially with the added frustration of the test, track and trace service, which hasn't really been as world beating as we were promised that it would be. But nevertheless, he's urged Britons to summon the discipline and resolve to avoid a second national lockdown after there have been many warnings of too many breaches of coronavirus rules. He's asked us to get through this winter together, and in doing that, set out that new list of coronavirus restrictions, which we've been through tonight. He freely admitted that the disease has started to spread again in an exponential way, and sent out really a stark warning of many more deaths if action wasn't taken now. We had the quite sobering press conference from Chris Whitty and Sir Patrick Vallance, didn't we, a little earlier, that warned of 50,000 infections a day by the middle of October if something wasn't done. And I think Boris Johnson was right in many of our cases when he said that this was the single biggest crisis that the world has faced in his lifetime, and said that he knew the UK could succeed in pushing back the virus because we have succeeded before. And that's all well and good to rile up the troops and inspire people to band together to fight coronavirus. But I think we really need to start to see some better results from our government, from that test, track and trace service, which really is, after people obeying the coronavirus restrictions, that's one of the most important things that is going to help people navigate this new world of COVID-19, because as we're starting to see, a lot of people will be completely ignoring self-isolation orders because they can't afford to. It's too disruptive in their family life. But of course, that builds on many more knock-on effects in many different ways, not just childcare at work, but in the spread of coronavirus. Boris Johnson talked of a rapid test which would help the country get back on its feet, but those are, they're in the future now. They are future technology that we don't have currently. So what do you think of these new restrictions? Do let me know in the comments below. If you're interested in finding out what is going on in the UK, not just in terms of coronavirus, but in terms of what else is going on. We had another earthquake in Leighton Buzzard here in the UK today. That's been something I've been covering on Haps. Come and follow me on Haps and you can find out more about all that sort of stuff. But thank you so much for joining me here tonight. Thanks for everyone who's commented, who's tuned in, and I'll be seeing you here on Haps and of course every other social media platform that it's broadcasting to when there's some more interesting news coming out of the UK. But thank you so much for watching, whatever it is where you are from, morning, noon or night. Have a fantastic one and I'll see you soon.